A wolf pup begged the woman for help. What she did next left everyone in shock. The forest was alive in the way only ancient woods could be. Trees with twisted branches loomed like silent watchers, their gnarled roots curling along the dark, damp earth. Mist clung to the ground in thick layers, hiding the forest floor in a soft silver-gray blanket. Even the moon seemed afraid to shine too brightly here, letting only a sliver of its pale light pierce the darkness. Elara moved carefully among the roots, her bare feet brushing against damp moss. The villagers always said the forest was cursed, but she had never feared it, not completely. Fear had no power over those who had long grown used to solitude. She had lived at the edge of the woods for as long as anyone could remember, tending her small garden and herbs, keeping to herself. The villagers whispered about her, the woman with strange eyes that seemed to see things no one else could. They said she had the gift of foresight, the ability to glimpse events before they happened. Some called her blessed, some called her cursed, but mostly they left her alone. That night, a different kind of sound reached her ears. A faint, trembling whimper that seemed almost human in its desperation.
She froze, listening. The sound was small, fragile, almost pleading.
It came from deeper within the forest, where the mist grew thick and the trees pressed closer together. Elara's heart quickened. She had learned over the years to trust her instincts, and something about this sound pulled at her like a thread she could not ignore. She followed it, stepping lightly on the moss, careful not to make a sound. Each step drew her closer to a small clearing, where the mist swirled around a cluster of roots and rocks. There, shivering and barely visible in the moonlight, was a wolf pup. Its fur was matted and dark, and its eyes shone with an unnatural light that made Elara catch her breath. The pup trembled violently, its tiny body pressed to the ground as if it feared the very world around it. Elara knelt slowly, letting her hands hover over the creature without touching it. Shh, she whispered softly. It's okay.
I won't hurt you. The pup tilted its head, sniffing the air as though it could sense the truth in her voice.
Then it let out a soft, plaintive cry and crawled closer, inch by inch. Something in its eyes, the mix of fear and pleading, tugged at her chest. She had lived alone for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to care for another being. Yet now she felt it, a quiet, fierce need to help this fragile creature. She reached out her hand. The pup hesitated, then, as if deciding that she was not a threat, crawled into her lap. Its small body shivered violently against her. She wrapped her arms around it, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath her palms. You poor thing, she whispered. What happened to you? The forest seemed to lean closer, listening.
Even the wind held its breath. Elara knew she should return the pup to the safety of the village, but the thought filled her with dread.
Villagers were wary of wolves. Some believed they carried curses or dark magic. No one would understand why she brought it home. And yet, leaving it here meant certain death. With a sigh, she rose, cradling the pup carefully. Come on, she murmured. I'll help you. You're safe with me. The journey back to her small cottage was quiet, the forest almost reverent around them. Elara spoke softly to the pup, telling it about the herbs she would use to clean its wounds, the blankets she would lay out to keep it warm. She did not understand why the pup had chosen her, or why she felt compelled to help. But a strange certainty filled her, as though fate itself had led her here. By the time she reached her cottage, dawn was beginning to brush the edges of the sky with pale pink light. Brr. The village below was still asleep, unaware of the small miracle, or perhaps the small danger, that had crept through the night. Inside the cottage, Elara laid the pup gently on a soft bed of blankets. Birth. She cleaned its wounds with warm water and herbal salves, murmuring words of comfort as the creature shivered under her touch. It whimpered softly, nuzzling against her hand as though it understood that she was its protector. Furry. Elara sat beside it for hours, feeling an unusual warmth in her chest. She had been alone for so long that she had forgotten the feeling of responsibility, of connection, separation. Yet here it was, small and fragile, demanding nothing but care and trust. But as the sun rose higher, a shadow of doubt crept into her mind. The villagers had always feared the forest. They spoke of wolves as omens, of dark forces lurking where the trees grew thickest. Why had this pup come to her? Was it a simple act of fate, or something more dangerous? Something that might draw the darkness closer to her door? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound that made her freeze. A faint, low growl, but not quite like a normal wolf's. It was deeper, more human in its resonance. The pup lifted its head and let out a long, shivering howl. And then, the sound shifted. The howl became a whisper, faint and tremulous, almost a voice calling her name.
Elara's heart pounded in her chest. She leaned closer, her hands frozen in midair.
Did you just call me? She whispered. The pup blinked, and its eyes glimmered with something that was not just animal fear but intelligence, an understanding that chilled her and thrilled her at the same time. It tilted its head and let out another soft cry, this one almost like a word, almost human. Elara stepped back, her mind racing. She had heard of magic in the forest, of creatures cursed or transformed, but she had never believed such things were real. And yet, here it was, a living proof that the world was wider, darker, and stranger than she had ever imagined.
A sense of both wonder and danger settled over her.
This small creature, so fragile and innocent, was clearly more than it seemed. And somehow, she knew that helping it would change her life forever. The sun climbed higher, casting light across the cottage. The warmth felt comforting, but the whisper of the pup's voice lingered in her mind. She could not shake the feeling that this was not merely a chance encounter. Something, or someone, had sent the pup to her. And if she failed to help, the consequences would not be hers alone. Elara wrapped the pup in a blanket, holding it close. We'll face this together, she whispered. I don't know what you are, but I'll help you, I promise. The pup nuzzled her hand, and for a moment the world outside seemed to fade away. The forest, the village, the warnings, all of it. There was only her and this strange, fragile creature. Breath. And then, just as she began to feel a small sense of hope, the pup's eyes glimmered brighter, almost unnaturally so, and it let out a final soft cry, a sound that was half wolf, half human. Elara's breath caught Bear. She stared at the pup, heart racing, and whispered, "What are you?" It only stared at her, its eyes full of longing, fear, and something else she could not name, a plea that went deeper than words. Elara knew in that moment that this night was only the beginning. Whatever force had brought this creature to her, whatever destiny awaited them both, it would not be easy. And yet she felt an undeniable pull, a thread of fate that bound her to this wolf pup, and she could not let go. Bah. As she settled beside the pup, watching it drift into uneasy sleep, the whispers of the forest seemed to grow louder, almost as if the trees themselves were listening. And somewhere, deep in the misted woods, a shadow moved, silent, watching, waiting. She only held the pup closer, unaware that the life she had known, the quiet, solitary life she had carved out for herself, was already slipping away, replaced by a world of magic, danger, and something far more powerful, a bond that could not be broken. And as the first light of dawn fell across the cottage, the pup stirred and let out another faint whisper. This time, it was clear. Help! Me! Valera's heart seized. She nodded, almost unconsciously, her hands trembling as she whispered back, I will. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, a pair of eyes glimmered, watching, waiting. The journey had begun. The morning sunlight poured through the windows of Alara's cottage, painting the room in pale gold. The wolf pup stirred on its blanket, eyes blinking as it tried to stand. Its fur was still matted, but its strength had grown overnight. Alara watched with a mix of relief and unease. Something about this creature felt different. She knelt beside it, brushing the fur gently.
You're stronger today, she said softly, but I still don't understand who you are.
Or what you are. The pup looked at her with those unusual luminous eyes, and for a moment, something shifted.
It gave a low, almost human sigh, then padded closer. Alara held out her hands, and it pressed its small head against her palm. Her heart ached at the mixture of vulnerability and intelligence she saw there. That afternoon, while tending her herbs in the garden, Alara noticed a stranger in the village square, a tall man with dark hair and piercing eyes, dressed in fine garments, but with an aura of unease. The villagers whispered nervously, pointing as he passed. He moved with purpose, scanning the surroundings as if searching for something. Or someone. Alara's pulse quickened when their eyes met across the distance. There was something familiar in his gaze, a depth that stirred recognition she could not place. That evening, as the forest grew dense in shadow, the wolf pup began acting strangely. It padded toward the cottage door and let out a soft, plaintive growl. Alara followed its gaze and froze. At the edge of the clearing stood the same dark-haired man, his figure framed by the silver mist. Before she could react, the pup leapt forward, transforming mid-leap. Its body shuddered, fur falling away in shimmering silver sparks, and standing before her was no longer a wolf, but a young man. Tall, strong, with eyes the same glowing amber she had seen before. Alara staggered backward. What are you? She whispered, unable to comprehend what she saw. The young man looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and desperation. My name is Kale, he said, his voice rich but strained. I am cursed.
Alara's mind raced. A human.
And a wolf? She had heard tales of cursed princes and stories told by the elders, but she had never believed them. Yet here he was, before her, trembling as if he had just survived a storm. Kale stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I was born a prince, he said quietly. But a sorceress cursed me. She turned me into a wolf, leaving me to wander the forest, waiting for someone with a heart pure enough to help me break it. I think that someone is you. Alara's breath caught.
Me? But
Inspiration. Why? Why would a prince's curse fall upon me? Kale's gaze softened. Because you see the world differently. You are not afraid to care, even for what seems lost or broken. That is what is needed to lift a curse like mine. Inspiration. Please, help me. She had lived her life in solitude, cautious of the world, wary of magic and superstition. And yet, something in Kale's eyes, the fear, the trust, the quiet plea, made her heart ache. She could not ignore it. I will try, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I do not know how. Kale reached for her hand, but hesitated, as if unsure whether he could trust his own strength or hers. When their fingers finally touched, a spark ran through her, not of pain, but of raw, unspoken connection. The air seemed to shift. Even the forest outside grew still, as though waiting. That night, Elara prepared a small fire in her cottage and laid out herbs, water, and blankets. Kale remained in his human form, though exhaustion weighed heavily on him. He sat quietly, watching her as she moved around the room. Every now and then he would glance at her with a strange intensity, his eyes betraying a mixture of gratitude, longing, and something darker, regret.
You must understand, he said finally, breaking the silence. I am not the same man I was before the curse.
The sorceress. She took more than my form. She tried to take my heart, my trust, my sense of self. Sometimes I feel as though I am nothing at all. Elara's chest tightened. She understood what it was to feel lost, to live with a wound no one else could see.
You are not nothing, she said softly. You are here, alive, and you are not alone.
Not while I am here. Kael looked at her, eyes shining. For a moment he seemed to relax, the tension in his shoulders easing. Thank you, he whispered. I do not know if I can survive this curse without you. The words hung in the room, heavy with truth. Elara's mind spun. She had never imagined that her quiet life would become intertwined with a prince cursed by magic. Yet here she was, bound to him by circumstance and fate. Over the next few days, Kale began to regain strength, though the curse left marks on him still. Shadows lingered around him in moments of weakness. His reflection sometimes flickered with fur, as though the wolf form he had inhabited still clung to him. Elara attended to him, watching for these shifts, guiding him through the changes. Each time, their bond grew stronger, not just of need, but of understanding. Yet the world beyond the cottage was not idle. Rumors of the wolf in the forest reached the ears of the village council, and whispers spread about a cursed prince hiding among them. Some feared him, some sought to capture him for their own gain. Elara sensed the growing tension but knew that Kael could not hide forever. One evening, under the silver glow of the moon, Kael took her hand and led her to the edge of the forest. There is something you must see, he said, voice low, urgent. The sorceress, she left traces of her power in this land. If we are to break the curse, we must confront them. We cannot do it alone. Elara looked into his eyes, seeing both fear and determination. Her heart pounded. The thought of facing a sorceress, of venturing into the unknown with this cursed man, was terrifying. And yet, she could not turn away.
I will go, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. But we must be careful.
Buh! The forest. It has eyes. Kale nodded, and for a brief moment he looked almost like the man he had been before the curse. Proud, strong, determined. But the shadows in his eyes reminded her that the curse had not only altered his form, but his very soul. That night, as they rested in the cottage, a strange feeling settled over Alara. The air felt heavy, almost electric, as though the forest itself was aware of their plans. The pup, once wolf, now human, lay by the fire, and yet a faint shimmer of fur still glimmered along his arms in the firelight. Alara watched him, her thoughts racing. She had never imagined herself part of a story like this, a story of curses, magic, and kings. And yet, the bond they had formed was undeniable. She had saved him from the forest, but now she understood that he had saved something in her as well, her willingness to trust, to feel, to connect.
The next day, as dawn broke, Kale and Alara prepared to leave the safety of her cottage.
She packed herbs, water, and small supplies while he checked his own strength, testing the limits of his human form. They moved carefully, knowing that the path would be dangerous, filled with unknown magic and the lingering power of the sorceress. As they stepped into the forest, the mist wrapped around them like a living veil. The trees seemed to bend slightly, branches twisting as though whispering secrets only the wind could carry. Every step felt deliberate, weighted with destiny. Kale glanced at Alara, his amber eyes softening. Whatever happens, he said quietly, thank you for coming with me. I do not know if I could face this alone. Alara met his gaze, her own heart trembling. You will not be alone, she said firmly. We face this together. No matter what comes, we will face it together. The forest grew darker as they moved deeper, the mist thickening, the shadows lengthening, and then, just as they reached a clearing, the air shifted. A chill ran down Alara's spine. Something unseen watched them, moving in the darkness, waiting. Kale stiffened, his senses alert. We are not alone, he murmured. His hand brushed hers, a silent promise and a shield. From the shadows, a whisper rose, a soft, melodic voice that carried both menace and warning. The prince is awake! Alara's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at Kale, who met her gaze with a mixture of determination and fear. The forest held its breath, and somewhere in the distance, a figure moved, shrouded in darkness, observing their every step. Alara knew, with a deep sinking certainty, that their journey had only begun. The cursed prince was human now, but the magic that bound him, and the dangers that awaited them, were far from over. And as they stepped forward into the unknown, the bond between them, fragile, unspoken yet undeniable, was already shaping the path ahead. The forest had grown darker as Kale and Alara pressed deeper into its heart. The trees twisted unnaturally, their shadows stretching like long fingers, and the mist hung thick around them, curling like smoke. Even during the day, sunlight seemed hesitant to enter this part of the woods. Birds did not sing. The wind whispered, carrying the faint echo of distant voices, voices that did not belong to the living. Alara kept her hand close to Kale's, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength beneath his touch.
Yet despite his regained human form, the weight of the curse still clung to him.
Every now and then a shadow would pass over his face, his amber eyes flickering, revealing the wolf that still lingered inside. They moved carefully, following a path that Kale had glimpsed in his dreams, a dream gifted by the forest itself. He had seen visions of the sorceress's relic, the object that could break his curse completely. It was hidden in an ancient temple, forgotten by time, guarded by magic and shadows that tested the heart as much as the body. Bursts. Elara's breath came in shallow bursts as they walked. "Do you feel it too?" she asked quietly, glancing at him. "Brr. The air. It feels alive." KL nodded. "The magic here is old, Beration. It watches, it tests. We must be careful." Desperate. His voice was low, steady, yet there was an edge of worry.
The sorceress's power is not gone.
Even in her absence, her traps remain. As they moved forward, the forest seemed to respond. Roots shifted beneath their feet, and branches arched toward them, as if warning them back. Beration. Shadows moved at the corner of Alara's vision, never fully forming, yet always there. Her heart thudded in her chest. Suddenly, a voice called from the mist, a calm, deliberate voice that sent chills down her spine. "I wondered when you would arrive." Beration. From the swirling fog, a figure emerged. A man dressed in fine robes, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp with calculation.
He was tall, with dark hair and a posture that spoke of authority.
"Who are you?" Kale demanded, stepping protectively in front of Alara. "I am Malric," the man said smoothly.
Beration. An advisor to the king. Or at least I was, before the curse took your place, Prince Kale.
Beration. "I have watched, and I know what you seek." His eyes flicked to Alara.
And who is this girl, a simple villager drawn into matters far above her station? Elara felt a flare of anger but kept her voice calm.
"I am here because he asked for my help, and because it is the right thing to do." Malric's lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. "Brave. Brave words. But bravery alone will not protect you in the trials ahead. The relic is guarded not by stones or walls, but by truth and fear. And fear. I can see it in your eyes already." Kyle's jaw tightened. Beration. "We do not need your counsel." Malric tilted his head. "Perhaps not." Beration. "But I offer it nonetheless. Be warned. The sorceress's magic tests more than the body." Beration. "It tests the heart, even those who care for you, even those who claim to love you." Beration. "May falter when the shadows press close." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. Kale's hand tightened around hers. "We will face it together," he said. His voice firm, though a flicker of doubt crossed his amber eyes. Malric bowed slightly, almost mocking, and then vanished into the mist. The forest returned to its uneasy quiet, but Elara's mind raced. The warning lingered, twisting like smoke. "Even those who claim to love you may falter." They pressed onward, climbing steep hills and wading through shallow streams. The deeper they went, the more Kale's curse seemed to manifest. Shadows clung to him in ways that made his skin prickly with unease. Occasionally his reflection would ripple, showing a fleeting flash of fur along his arms, or a wolfish snarl in his face before snapping back to human.
Elara reached out, touching his arm. "Kale, it's okay."
Berate. "You are still you. No magic can change that inside." Kale exhaled slowly. "I fear it will. I fear that every step I take, every shadow I face, I lose a part of myself. And then, who am I to deserve your trust?" "Trust is not given lightly," she said. And you earned mine when you allowed me to help you. Inspiration. Nothing else matters. They camped that night in a small clearing, the fire casting dancing shadows on their faces. Kale sat close, watching the flames, while Ilara carefully prepared herbs for wounds and bruises he had sustained during their journey. She noticed that each time he transformed briefly in his sleep, he shivered, not from cold, but from the residual pain of the curse.
I feel divided. Kale murmured suddenly, his voice almost a growl. Half of me wants to fight, half of me wants to surrender.
The wolf within, it is impatient, untamed.
I fear it may not wait for me to become whole again.
Ilara placed her hand over his. Then we will be patient. The wolf is part of you, yes, but it does not define you. You define yourself through your choices. Inspiration. And I will help you no matter what shape you take. Kale's eyes softened, and for a moment, the tension left his face. But deep in the forest, unseen and silent, a shadow moved, watching, learning, waiting for the right moment to strike. The next morning they reached the outskirts of the temple, a structure hidden among roots and rocks, overgrown and ancient. Symbols of old magic were carved into the stone, faintly glowing in the dim light. Kale's pulse quickened. This is it, he whispered. The sorceress's relic is inside. But we must be careful. The trials are not physical alone. They test what lies within your soul.
Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Then we face it together, she said, echoing Kale's earlier promise.
The first chamber of the temple was filled with darkness, yet faint light glimmered along the walls. The air smelled of earth and magic, heavy and almost suffocating. As they stepped forward, the shadows seemed to move, curling around them like living beings. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the darkness. It was Malric. I warned you, he said calmly. Even those who claim to help may falter when confronted by fear. Kyle stiffened. Why are you here? What do you want? Why are you here? What do you want? Malric's smile was thin and cruel. I want the prince's power. If you fail the relic, and your life will belong to me.
He did not want to do this, but you leave me no choice.
The man's ambition and cunning were evident in every move, every glance. This was no ordinary trial. This was betrayal at its deepest level. Malric raised a hand, and shadows swirled around him, forming barriers of darkness that pressed toward Kyle. The prince's wolf instincts flared, his body tensing. He transformed briefly, claws extending, teeth bared. But Ilara grabbed his arm. No! She whispered fiercely. Do not let anger guide you. Trust yourself. Trust us. Kyle exhaled, his wolf form dissolving back into human. You are right, he said, voice low but steady. I must control this.
We must face him together. They moved side by side, the bond between them stronger than the fear pressing in. Ilara lifted her hands, weaving small charms and herbs into the air, magic she had learned from the forest, simple but powerful gestures meant to bind and protect.
Kale followed her lead, stepping carefully, using his strength not to attack but to guard her and himself. The shadows lashed at them, curling like snakes, testing every doubt, every fear. But Kale faltered briefly. memories of his curse and failures flashing in his mind. Elara caught his hand, grounding him. "You are not alone," she whispered. "We face this together." With a final surge of effort, Kale and Elara broke through the shadowed barrier. Brrr. The chamber beyond opened into a small room, and at its center lay the relic, an orb of silver light, pulsing gently as though alive. Kale stepped forward, awe in his eyes, but Malric was not done. He surged forward, a swirl of dark energy trailing him, aiming to seize the orb before Kale could touch it. Kale acted instinctively, stepping in front of Elara, and for a moment the shadow seemed to respond to him as if he were the wolf and the prince at once. The clash of magic sent waves of light and shadow across the chamber, and Elara's heart pounded. She reached for Kale, her trust anchoring him as he fought the darkness within and without. Inspiration. Finally, with a cry that echoed through the ancient stones, Kale grasped the orb. A pulse of light erupted, washing over the chamber. Malric screamed, retreating into the shadows, his power broken for now. The orb's light enveloped Kale, and for a fleeting moment he was whole, not just human, not just cursed, but complete. Elara collapsed to her knees, exhausted but relieved. Kale knelt beside her, eyes glowing amber once more, and for the first time they looked at each other without fear, without hesitation. But outside the temple the forest stirred ominously. Somewhere, deep in the mist, another shadow watched. The trials were far from over, and though they had survived this betrayal, the path ahead promised more danger, more tests, and more choices that would challenge the heart itself. Elara reached for Kale's hand, and he took it, holding it tightly. "We are strong." Kale nodded, voice soft but resolute. "Yes. But we must be vigilant. There are forces still watching, still waiting." And I fear that the true challenge has yet to come. The temple loomed behind them, ancient and silent. But inside a quiet pulse of magic remained, a reminder that the curse was not entirely gone, and that the world they had stepped into was one of shadow, power, and unyielding tests of the heart. And as they left the chamber, moving back into the misty forest, Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew the journey was only getting harder. The prince was no longer alone, and neither was she. But the darkness would follow them, and the whispers of betrayal had not yet been silenced. The forest held its breath once more, watching, waiting for the next move. The sky above the forest had turned an eerie shade of red, like molten copper, as the day faded into twilight. A blood-colored eclipse hovered on the horizon, casting the land in a strange, otherworldly glow. The forest was silent, but the air vibrated with power, the kind of power that was old, dangerous, and hungry.
Elara and Kale moved carefully along a narrow path carved into the mountainside, the relic's light pulsing faintly in Kale's hands.
The orb's energy hummed in response to the approaching eclipse, a reminder that the final test was near. "We are close," Kale whispered, his amber eyes fixed on the peak above. "The sorceress's lair is at the summit. The relic will respond only when the magic is complete. But we must tread carefully. One wrong move, and it could consume everything." Elara's heart raced, a mix of fear and determination. She had followed Kale through forests thick with shadows, faced betrayal and magic that tested her mind and spirit, and now the final confrontation awaited. She pressed closer to him, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. The path grew steeper, twisted by jagged roots and sharp rocks. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision, curling like smoke, as though the forest itself sought to protect the sorceress or warn them away. Inspiration. Kale's steps were careful, deliberate, but each movement radiated strength. He had changed since Alara first found him as a trembling wolf pup. The curse's weight still lingered, but he had regained much of himself. Barris. They reached a plateau at the summit, and there it was, the sorceress's lair, a structure of black stone and twisting spires, alive with dark energy. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing as though the building itself was watching them. Brr. "Stay close," Kale said, his voice low and wary. "Her magic will test more than our bodies." Brr. "It will test our hearts, our fears, our truths." Brr.
Elora nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Together they stepped into the lair.
Brr. The air inside was thick, tinged with ozone and ancient spells. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that mimicked their deepest fears.
For Kale, they became flashes of his wolf self, wild, untamed, clawing at him from within. For Alara, they became visions of solitude, of losing him, of failing to protect what she had come to care for more than anything.
A cold, melodic voice echoed through the chamber.
"So the boy has found his companion," the sorceress said, emerging from the darkness.
Inspiration. Her hair was black as midnight, her eyes glinting like shards of crystal. "And she thinks she can save him." Kale stepped forward, positioning himself between Alara and the sorceress. "This ends tonight," he said firmly. "No more curses." Inspiration. "No more harm." The sorceress laughed, a sound that cut through the shadows like ice.
"You misunderstand, boy. The curse was never mine alone to lift."
Bear, you have carried it, endure it, and yet you still cling to your weaknesses. You are strong, but only together can you be whole. Prove it. Inspiration. The shadows shifted, forming a series of challenges, illusions of failure, fear, and betrayal, designed to break their bond. Kale faltered at the first vision, himself, alone, wolfish, trapped, and lost. Grasp. Elara grabbed his arm, grounding him.
You are not alone, she whispered.
Inspiration. I am here. We face this together. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Yes, he said.
Together, the shadows recoiled, but the sorceress's voice pierced the chamber. Your bond will be tested.
One of you must face your deepest regret alone, or both will fail. Elara felt a pang of fear, but she knew what she would see if she stepped forward alone. Memories of her years in solitude, the hurt she had buried deep, the loneliness she had learned to endure. But she also knew she could not abandon Kale.
I will face it, she said softly. But I need you with me.
Then we do it together. The first illusion surrounded them. Kale's human form flickered with the shadow of the wolf, eyes glowing amber as teeth bared in silent anger. He growled, a sound both human and animal, and the illusion tried to pull him inward to separate him from her.
Elara held his hands, focusing on their bond, on the trust and care that had brought them here. You are more than this, she said.
You are Kale. You are human. You are not defined by the curse. The wolfish shadow hesitated, then shrank back, dissolving into mist. Kale exhaled, the strain evident, but his eyes met hers with warmth and gratitude. The sorceress's laughter echoed again. Good, but one final test remains. Breath. A choice must be made. One of you must give up what they hold most dear. or both shall remain trapped forever.
Brr. Ilara's heart pounded.
Inspiration. She understood immediately. The orb, the relic, would demand a sacrifice, a giving of something precious to complete the magic. Kale's eyes met hers, filled with fear and trust.
I will do it, Kale whispered. I
will give up the curse, even if it costs me everything. No, Elara said firmly.
You've already endured too much. It is not yours to bear alone.
Inspiration. We do this together. They approached the orb. It pulsed brighter with each step, reacting to the strength of their bond. They placed their hands on it simultaneously, and a wave of energy swept through the chamber. Inspiration. Shadows shrieked, twisting in pain and confusion. Images of their fears and regrets flashed before them. The wolf, the loneliness, the doubts. But they held firm. Inspiration. Their bond, their trust, their willingness to face each challenge together became the force that the relic needed. Kale's grip tightened around Ilara's hand. "Brr. I trust you," he said. "I have always trusted you."
Brr. Ilara's eyes shimmered with tears. "And I trust you." A final pulse of light erupted from the orb, washing over the chamber.
Inspiration. The shadow screamed, then shattered, dissolving into nothingness. The sorceress's form twisted, her power undone by the purity of their unity. She vanished, leaving only the echo of her voice. The bond was stronger than I imagined. You have succeeded. Kale collapsed to his knees, exhausted but human, whole for the first time in years. Ilara knelt beside him, brushing his hair from his face. The wolf that had lingered within him flickered one last time, then disappeared, leaving only the man he had been meant to be. They rose together hand in hand as the eclipse began to fade. Inspiration. The blood-red sky softened to deep indigo, then finally to the first light of dawn. The forest, once twisted and ominous, now seemed to breathe freely, its magic settling into quiet harmony. Kale turned to Ilara, his amber eyes filled with gratitude and wonder. I am myself again," he whispered. "And I am not alone." "You are not," she said softly.
"And you never will be, as long as we face this together." The journey back down the mountain was quiet but filled with unspoken understanding. They moved through the forest, which seemed to honor their victory with calm winds and gentle sunlight filtering through the trees.
The shadows that had once stalked them no longer moved with menace, and even the mist appeared less threatening, parting to reveal the path ahead.
As they emerged from the forest, the village below came into view.
The people watched in awe, seeing Kale, the prince, walking beside Ilara, the woman who had saved him. Murmurs of amazement spread quickly. No one had expected such a transformation. No one had expected a villager to stand beside a prince and face the dark magic together. But Ilara and Kale paid them little mind. Their journey had been far beyond whispers and awe. They had faced the curse, the sorceress, and their own fears. What remained was a quiet, deep understanding that their lives were forever intertwined.
Kale stopped near the village edge, taking a deep breath of the fresh air.
"This land, it is alive again," he said, eyes sweeping over the hills and forests. "And I
am alive again. All because of you."
Ilara smiled faintly. "No, because of us."
We faced it together.
That is what made the difference. Inspiration. He reached for her hand, holding it gently but firmly. Then we face whatever comes next, together.
For a moment, silence settled over them, peaceful and complete.
Brr. The curse was broken, the shadows gone, and yet the forest seemed to hum with quiet magic, a reminder that life and fate were never fully still. As they walked toward the village, a faint howl echoed from the distant forest. Inspiration. It was not a threat, but a reminder, a whisper of the wild, untamed magic that remained. The bond between them was strong, forged in trials, fear, and trust. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. Cale glanced at Elara, amber eyes meeting hers. No matter what comes, he said softly, we endure. Bree, together.
Elara squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of it deep within her chest.
Ration. Together, she echoed. And so, beneath the softening light of dawn, two souls, once lost, once broken, walked forward into a world renewed, their hearts intertwined, ready to face life, love, and destiny as one. The forest behind them breathed a quiet sigh. Somewhere unseen, the echoes of magic and shadow lingered, but they no longer held power over those who had learned the true strength of trust, courage, and unity. The journey had ended. And yet, in the hush of the dawn, a story of redemption, courage, and unbreakable bond had just begun.